Chad, thank you. Whoa, I hope that means you approve. Folks, thanks for being here. Chad, great warrior for freedom, great cheerleader for the South Carolina Republican Party. You've helped to build one of the best parties in the country, and we appreciate it. To Lindsay, my partner in the Senate, and all the House delegation, we've got a great team. But even more important, and the reason that we do, is I'm here tonight to thank all of you. Often when we have a tough vote, something we know we have to do, I see so many of my colleagues looking over their shoulder. They're talking about the fact that they can't do what they know they need to do because of the press back home and that the people won't support them. But we know when we take those tough votes, when we stand together for the right thing, that you've got our back. And I want to thank all of you and the Republicans all around the state for getting our backs. I don't have to tell you, and we talk about it all the time, this is a make or break election, not just for the Republican Party, but for our country. All the political experts are telling us that we have to run on Obama's record, not on what we're going to do. They talk about the broken promises of President Obama, and there's a long list. You know, he promised in the first year he would cut our deficit in half, yet he's created more debt than any other president. He promised that his government spending plan that he called a stimulus would have our unemployment rate below 6% right now, but there are fewer Americans working than in decades. He told us that his health care bill would lower the cost of health care and that we could keep the policies that we have. Health care costs are exploding. Businesses are dropping their insurance. He told us that his government takeover of the financial industry through Dodd-Frank would loosen up credit and help to create a better economy. Another broken promise. He said he would protect traditional marriage. You know where he stands on that today. The only promise I know that he's kept is to increase energy prices. That's one that we can count on in the future. But folks, while we need to remind Americans what this president has done and the promises that he has broken, it is critically important that we tell America what the alternative is. It's important that we remind Americans of who we are, what made us prosperous, to talk about the principles of freedom and how that can give this country the prosperity and the opportunity, the jobs that we know we need and that we know we can have. That vision of America that has made us so great, made us so different than any country in the world, is largely forgotten, even in the Republican Party, sometimes when we're campaigning. But we have a speaker here tonight that can be that voice for freedom, that can inspire America once again to do those things, to follow those principles that made us great. You know, I first met Marco when he was running for the Senate. I knew a little bit about him. He just had come from the Republican Senate Committee where he had been rejected because they had just endorsed his opponent, Governor Charlie Crist. Now, Marco had graduated the University of Florida, went on to law school. He's married, 4 wonderful children. By 35, he was Speaker of the Florida House. Before he was elected, he traveled the state of Florida, listening to people, and he came up with 100 ideas in a book of what they needed to do to move Florida forward. He published the book. All 100 of those passed the House when he was Speaker. Over half of them became law. He showed at 35 years old that he could get things done. He had a bright future in politics. Everyone told him he should run for Attorney General. He had a clear path to do it. Yet he decided our country was in trouble, and he put everything on the line and decided to run against a popular governor with millions of dollars with the endorsement of the whole Washington Republican establishment. When he came to my office, it was a few weeks after I had endorsed Pat Toomey over Arlen Specter. And so I had already gotten in trouble with my leadership, which is a good kind of trouble to be in, and I appreciate you getting my back on that one. But in Washington, you get cynical. But I sat with Marco for a few minutes, and I really had my eyes watering because I realized that I had forgotten that great vision of America the opportunity we have, how blessed we are as a nation, and I felt inspired. He was 30 points behind in the polls at that point to Governor Charlie Crist. No money, no organization, really no real chance. But he was willing to put his whole political career and the time away from family, and I decided I was too. America, once they got a vision of what Marco had to say, got behind him everywhere. And once you shine a spotlight on a good candidate, the rest takes care of itself. I'm proud that he came to South Carolina, and we went around the state, and a lot of you contributed to his campaign. But by the time the dust settled, he overwhelmingly not only won his primary, but the Senate race. And now he works with me in Washington and with Rand Paul and Mike Lee, with Pat Toomey, with Ron Johnson, Kelly Ayotte, and a number of bright, young, new conservatives that are fresh faces for America to share that vision of what we are. And since then, Marco has become a leader, not just a Republican leader or a conservative leader, but he is an American leader. And he is helping us tell America and remind us what it is that made us great. That inspiration has made our whole party coalesce around those ideas and has helped to change us already. I'm excited that we were a part of making sure he was a senator. And I'm excited that he has come back to South Carolina to let us know he appreciates you and to remind us all of that great vision that people have handed us generations before us, and that it is our job, our obligation to pass it on even better to the next generation. Please give Marco Rubio a warm South Carolina welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I hope I don't need a drink of water during the speech. That's a long reach down there, but you'll forgive me. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to you today. I'm really honored and privileged to be here with you. Let me begin by recognizing a few people. Chairman, thank you for inviting me. I'm grateful to you. Thank you for having me here today. Thank you for all of you for coming. There are still some people back home. I told them I'm coming to South Carolina tomorrow to speak, and they're like, well, why do they care what you have to say? So I'm grateful that you guys do and that you would give me this opportunity to speak to you today. Your House members, all 5 of them, the Republicans, do a phenomenal job. They were and I think Lindsey Graham alluded to it, during the debt limit debate, they were real forceful and involved. In fact, they were in many respects leading the charge on some of the key points that the conservative movement drove in that regard. And you should be very, very proud of the 5 Republican members that you have sent to represent you in the House of Representatives. To Lindsey Graham, thank you for those very kind words. I did not know Lindsey well before I got elected to the U.S. Senate, have had an opportunity to work with him on foreign relations issues and foreign policy issues. Got a chance to travel with him to Libya, which was a unique experience to go there and see pro-American graffiti in an Arab country in North Africa on our behalf. A reminder of how extraordinarily powerful the American example is all over the world. And there was no pro-Lindsey Graham graffiti in Libya, but we're working on it. All kidding aside, Lindsey, thank you for your friendship and your leadership and the example you show us, especially on the national defense issues, where you're such a leader on behalf of our military and on behalf of America's role in the world. I could give a whole speech about the role Jim DeMint has played leading in my road to the United States Senate. And in fact, if you want to learn more about it, you can see it in my book, An American Son, which will be out in 3 weeks, but you can pre-buy it now on Amazon.com. That's just a little plug. All kidding aside, I went to Washington on a day in May of 2009 after I had decided to run for the United States Senate.
And on that day, I was informed by many people in the Republican establishment that they had made a choice, that they were going to be endorsing the sitting governor of the state of Florida. And I can tell you now, you can put on a brave face, but after years of being Speaker of the House and a member of the legislature in Florida, having always worked on Republican causes, to be told that you're not going to be supported, in fact, you're going to be worked against, was demoralizing. It was difficult to deal with at the time. I was a little down, and it was a day filled with bad news. And then I got a phone call informing me that Senator Jim DeMint was willing to meet with me and see me. I didn't know a lot about Senator DeMint. And to tell you the truth, for the first few seconds, I thought it was a crank call. But it was not. It was true. And the fact that any U.S. senator would even want to speak to me on that day was important. And it lifted up my spirits. I'll never forget calling home and telling my wife I had met with a senator who had encouraged me, and a few weeks later he endorsed me. I can say this to you without any exaggeration. If Jim DeMint had not endorsed me, I would not be a member of the U.S. Senate today. And while I think he liked me after he met me, I think more important was how critical he thought the election was for the future of our country. And it wasn't just me who he helped get there, it was other members, some of who he's mentioned tonight, whether it's Rand Paul or Mike Lee or Ron Johnson or Pat Toomey. And I can tell you the U.S. Senate is a different and better place because of the leadership he showed in 2010. So Jim, thank you. So what I wanted to do tonight for a few moments is talk to you. You know, being here tonight is an extraordinary honor. The truth is, all joking aside, you guys could have anybody. The South Carolina Republican Party could have anyone in the country, any prominent Republican in the country come and speak to you. The fact that you would choose me to do this tonight is an extraordinary honor. 2 years ago at this time, I was a candidate that was 30 points down in the polls. Only 4 or 5 people in the whole state of Florida thought that I could win. And all of them lived in my house. And so a lot has changed over the last couple of years. And so the fact that you would invite me to be here and speak to you is an extraordinary honor. But let me tell you what else it does. It forces you to stop for a second and reflect. It forces you to stop for a second and remind myself of why I ran to begin with, of why I chose this race and why I chose to serve in the U.S. Senate, of why I wanted to be involved in politics again, not just in 2010, but even now. And in so many ways, those feelings speak to the issues that we face as a nation and as a party. Now, you know the important and unique role that this state plays in Republican politics. You know the important and unique role that you play in American politics. And so I think there is a special obligation on Republicans in South Carolina to fully understand and embrace how important this election truly is in 2012. Now, every election is important. But I hope that in the next few minutes I can make an argument to you that the elections that we have this year are so extraordinary and consequential that it justifies a sense of unity as a party unlike anything we have ever done before. It's normal in politics to have rivalries. It's normal in our party, a big tent party, a more diverse party than the Democratic Party is, a party where there are differences of ideas and views. It's important for us to have these differences in these debates, and that's why we have primaries, and that's why we have elections, and that's why we have elections at the committee levels. This is an important discussion which improves us and constantly allows us to renew ourselves. But what I want to leave you with tonight is a sense that the stakes in this election are so extraordinary that unlike ever before, the Republican Party at this moment needs to be more unified than it's ever been with a singular purpose, and that is to change who occupies the White House and the majorities in the United States Senate. Now, one of the common themes that you hear in politics today is people are tired of partisanship and bickering and argument. Now, I know this is a pretty nonpartisan crowd, so you hear that everywhere. People saying why are everybody always fighting? Why can't they agree on anything? And I think one of the reasons I want to outline to you tonight is because, in fact, these elections, particularly the one this year, is not a competition between two different teams. Politics is not a sport, although it may often feel that way. There are true real-life consequences to the people we elect and the choices that they make. And this debate that we're having today in America is literally a debate between two very different views of the role of government in our country and the role of our country in the world. And so there has to be a debate. There has to be an argument, because there are two very different views of what government should mean in our lives and what America should mean in the world. And in the end, this election is nothing less than a choice between those different views. And whatever choice we make is the one that generations of Americans will have to deal with and live with. And it will impact people not just here, but all over the world. Now, in order to understand the choice before us, it's important to remind ourselves of who we are. And I say this to you because I think oftentimes those of us, like myself, born and raised in this country, in the American century, in an extraordinary era of prosperity and freedom, I think sometimes it's natural and human to take that for granted. Maybe to come to believe that this is the way it's always been, and this is the way it is everywhere. But it isn't. The life you and I lead, the freedoms and the opportunities, the prosperity that we've known, is not just rare, it's unique. And not just today, but in the course of human history. The truth is that almost everyone that has ever been born in the history of the world has had little to no role to play in choosing the people who lead them. The truth is that throughout human history, most societies gave people no voice or choice in who their leaders were. The truth is that throughout human history, all over the world, and even today in many parts of the world, where you will go in life, how far you will go, and what you will accomplish is determined for you before you are even born. For most of the people in the world and in the history of the world, your future is decided before you take your first breath. What did your parents do? Who's your family? Who do you know? How well connected are you? These things decide everything for you. You are trapped and you are limited by the very circumstances of your birth. This has been the rule, not the exception, throughout the history of the world. About 200 and some odd years ago, some extraordinarily intelligent and brave men decided to write something called the Declaration of Independence. Now, this was a political document, but the principles in that document were not really political ones. They were moral and spiritual principles. Simple principles, but profound and powerful. They didn't make these principles up. They weren't even the first to write about them. But they wrote them nonetheless. The principles were as follows. Number one, every human being ever born anywhere in the world is equal. Number two, that every human being anywhere in the world has certain rights, and that the source of these rights is not your government or your laws or your leaders. It's God. That every single one of us, every person, not every person born in North America, every single person has certain rights that come to you from your Creator. That no government has the right to deny you these rights. In fact, if a government denies you these rights, it is an illegitimate government. These are simple concepts. Concepts that as Americans we say, of course. But most nations in the world don't live by those principles. Those were revolutionary words at the time, in a world where leaders claimed that God had put them in those positions. At a time when most people were told that you could never be more than what your parents or your grandparents had ever been. The result is that from those principles sprung a nation. A nation that, living by these principles, led to a system of government and of laws that have provided us freedoms, political freedoms, unlike any that man has ever known. It also, by the way, created an economic system. For as much as our political freedoms and liberties get attention, it is our economic liberties that have provided for us a level of prosperity and happiness and opportunity that few people, if any, have ever known in the history of the world. The source of our free enterprise system finds its roots in the notion that every single person has a God-given right to fulfill their potential and pursue their dreams. One thing is to write that on a piece of paper. Another thing is to live by them. And still yet another is to be willing to die for those principles, and not just for yourself, but for other people and other nations all over the world. That doesn't mean America was perfect. It doesn't mean the American people always got everything right. It doesn't mean that our history is one without struggle and mistakes. But because of those principles and the freedoms and the prosperity that it gave us, over the last 230 some odd years, the American people have created here the single greatest nation and society in the history of the world. And in the process have changed the world. The American example has inspired people all over the world to change their own nations. The American example has literally changed the lives of millions of people all over this planet. I can tell you what you already know, that the world is safer, and the world is better, and the world is freer, because over the last 200 and some odd years, and especially since the end of World War II, America has been the most powerful nation on the earth. This is all true. To you and me, this is not even a topic of debate. We see it as fact. We know it to be true. And so, by the way, does much of the rest of the world. And yet this idea that somehow America is different and special and unique has always elicited doubt and giggles from some who observe the American political process. There are those in American politics today that really don't believe that. Now, they'll never admit it. You'll never see a candidate for president stand before a television screen or at a debate and basically say, America's just another country. Well, actually, maybe you will. But they usually try to avoid it. But their actions speak louder than their words. And it's in their policies that you truly come to understand how they truly view America. First, they don't really believe in the American free enterprise system, though they give lip service as if they do. They believe that free enterprise, while it creates great wealth and great prosperity, they believe it also creates great inequality. And so what it requires is strong political leaders to protect us from ourselves, to distribute our wealth and to balance our lives. They don't believe in American power. In fact, they don't think America should be involved around the world, and that in fact what we need to do is work more closely with extra-national organizations who have their role to play, but not at our expense, and certainly not at the expense of our sovereignty and of our leadership. And it's in their policies that you come to truly understand how they view the role of government in our lives and America in the world. And that's the story of the last 3.5 years. Because the policies of the last 3.5 years are the policies of people that, though I do not doubt love our country, have a very different view of the role of government in our lives and the role of our country in the world. And their policies prove it. And so now the choice before the American people is consequential. Because if the current occupant of the White House, the President Barack Obama, is reelected, it will reaffirm this view of our nation. It will reaffirm this role of government in our lives and the role of America in the world. And so the choice we have before us today in 2012 is literally a definitional one. We are being asked to define, not just for ourselves, but for our children, for our grandchildren, and literally for the world, what kind of America this is going to be in the 21st century. Those are the stakes of this election. This is not about whether conservatives or liberals win. This is not about whether Republicans or Democrats win. This is about defining what kind of country we want and what kind of role we want it to play in this new century. And the debate is a fundamental one, because the policies this president has chosen to follow are policies that tell us that the essence of our greatness is our government and our political leaders. And while certainly government is important and it has a role to play, America's greatness has never found its source in our politicians. We're not a great nation because we've had great presidents, although we've had great presidents. We're not a great nation because we've had great senators or great congressmen, although we've had great senators and great congressmen. We have been a great nation because we have great people. It is our people that is the source of our greatness. It is the story of everyday Americans from all walks of life, whose stories will never be told, whose faces will never be on the cover of a magazine. There'll never be any movies about them. And yet every single day, in real ways, they are not just changing our country, they're changing the world. People that have a great idea and draw up a business plan on a scrap piece of paper, take all their money out of the bank and open up a business, and it works. And today thousands of people are feeding their families and have a job because that person took that risk. Everyday people from all walks of life who don't sit around and wait for the government van to give someone a ride to a doctor. They take their elderly neighbor in their own car to a doctor's visit because that's what Americans do. Everyday people from all walks of life that understand there's a role for government to play. Of course there is. We believe in the safety net, not as a way of life, but we believe in a safety net as a way to provide for those who cannot provide for themselves, to help those who have fallen to stand up and try again. But the role of our government has never been instead of our role as individuals, as citizens, as neighbors, as parents, as members of a community. And our people still understand that. But sometimes our leaders don't, including leaders in our own party. And look, I can say this, that I understand that when you get elected, one of the things you want to do is make a difference. You see a problem and you want to address it. And as a U.S. Senator, there are really two ways that I, through government, can address an issue. I can pass a law, or I can create some government program. The problem is that sometimes, even if your intentions are good, these actions can be counterproductive, especially if you lose sight that at the end of the day, the true source of our greatness finds itself in our people and in the role they play in our communities. And when government crowds that out, it begins to crowd out the very true essence of what makes us different from the rest of the world. And so the president and his party's view of America's government and our lives is a failed one. It hasn't worked. These ideas that sounded so good in the classrooms at Harvard and Yale haven't really worked out well in the real world. And so they get frustrated. They get frustrated. They can't win on their record. And so they've chosen to go down a different road. One that I think is destructive, counterproductive, and very unfortunate. For all the policy disagreements that we may have with the president, it is hard to understate how much he inspired people across this country 4 years ago with his promises to unite America and lift it up. The man who today occupies the White House and is running for president is a very different person. We have not seen such a divisive figure in modern American history as we have over the last 3.5 years. Sadly, because he cannot win on his record, the president has decided that he must divide us in order to win, that he must pit Americans against each other because that's the only way he can get to 50 plus 1%. And so today, on issue after issue, cause after cause, the strategy that this White House and his party is employing is a destructive one that pits Americans against each other. Rich versus poor, men versus women. Never have we seen such an effort to divide the American people in an effort to win an election as we have seen today. And I'll tell you why it's so destructive. Because this is never who we've been. Never have we been a nation that's taught our children that the reason for you to do better is for someone else to do worse. Never have we been a people that has taught our children or believed that the way for you to climb the economic ladder is to pull someone else down from the economic ladder. Never have we been a nation that has told people that the reason why things are not going well for you is because they're going too well for somebody else. Never have we been a nation that takes our children and shows them the stories of those who are successful and teaches them to envy it instead of celebrate it. Never have we taught our people that the only way that we can do better is for others to do worse. We have never believed that. That's what other people believe. That's what other nations do. And that's why people leave those places and come here. Because it didn't work there. And so in an effort to win this election, they try to divide us against each other. The problem is that if it works, it will literally rob us of what makes us different. If it works, it will literally strip us of what makes us exceptional. Not just today, but in the history of the world. This issue is very important to me. This is a Saturday night. Saturday nights, when I get to speak at events like this on Saturday nights, it causes me to reflect a little bit. 5 decades ago, my dad worked on Saturday nights too. Except his job was that of a bartender. He stood behind a bar night after night, not just 5 decades ago, but for decades, working hard on behalf of his family and his children. My father was born into very different circumstances than mine. I was born a citizen of the greatest nation in all of human history, not blessed with wealthy parents or well-connected parents, but raised by a mother and a father, married and in love with each other and committed to their family, in a strong and stable home, who encouraged us to dream and never taught us to believe that anything was impossible for us. The very purpose of their lives was to give us the chance to do all the things they never could. Sometimes those of us forget, I think all of us forget, that our parents were once our age. And that when they were our age, they had dreams and hopes too. Our parents wanted to do things with their lives, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. I'm not sure when it was, but at some point in his life, I think my father came to realize that there were things that were not going to happen for him. It just wasn't in the cards. And at some point in his life, he decided that the purpose of his life had become to give us the chance to do all the things that he could not. And he didn't. Why and how? How come I have gotten to do things he never did? How come he stood behind a bar and tonight I stand behind a podium? Why am I here with you today? Well, there are a lot of reasons. Because they worked hard and they sacrificed. Because they encouraged us to dream. Because I worked hard myself. Because God blessed us. But the one that's impossible to ignore is the fact that God blessed me with the opportunity and the blessing to grow up in this society, where when you work hard and sacrifice on behalf of your children, it's not in vain. When you spend all your days and nights doing everything you can to ensure that the doors that were closed for you would be open for them, it's not in vain. That journey from behind that bar to this podium here before you tonight, it's my personal story as our family. But it happens to be our story as a nation. Because you see, every single one of us, no matter who you are here tonight, every single one of us can trace our history back to someone who made it the purpose of their lives to ensure that we would have the opportunities they never did. Now you see, people all over the world have those feelings. Men and women everywhere on this planet desire that. But only in a few places is it even possible. Only in a few places in the history of the world would hard work and sacrifice like the ones your parents and grandparents made, and like the ones that mine made, would ever have a chance to come to fruition. And this nation is one of those unique places where it was possible. And now the question will be whether we will continue to be that place. Will we continue to be the place where our economic system reflects that fundamental belief that it doesn't matter where you came from or how your last name is pronounced? It doesn't matter what circumstances you grew up in or whether you come from a connected family or not. If you work hard and play by the rules, anyone from anywhere can accomplish anything. That is who we've been. And now that is what we must decide whether that's who we want to remain. And it has consequences beyond the shores of our own country. Because you see, if America's diminished, if we lose that about ourselves, if what makes us different and special from the rest of the world is lost, who will take our place? What other nation is willing to be for the world what America has been? The answer is there is nobody. There is nowhere else. If America is no longer the place that we have been, especially since the end of World War II, there is nothing or no one, no other nation, and no other people ready or able to take our place. The consequences of what we're deciding impacts more than just Americans. It impacts people all over the world. The American example is still an inspiration to people all over this planet who look to America and see people just like them accomplishing things here they would never to be able to do over there. And so they know it's possible. And so they dream that for themselves and their own nations. Look around the world. Look at the nations that are pulling millions of people out of poverty and into the middle class. They're doing it because they've been inspired by the American example. Who will take our place if we're no longer that example? There is no one. Those are the stakes. That's how important this truly is. As we reflect on these things, one of the most difficult things sometimes is you ask yourself, why us? Why can't we? There's also sentiment. Americans don't sometimes enjoy this role. We don't like telling other people what to do. We don't particularly relish the role of world leadership on a constant basis. Many of us, most of us Americans, would love nothing better than to just focus on our own lives and our own nation and our own problems. It's a normal way to feel. Why us? Why can't someone else lead for a while? Why can't some other nation carry the burden for a little while? And the answer is because the source of our greatness is in so many ways our blessings. We have been blessed with so many extraordinary things. But as our faith teaches us, we're not just blessed so we can have. We're also blessed so we can give. And the most important thing that America can give the world is our example. The most important thing that America can do for the world is be America. The most important thing that we can do for people all over this planet is to live the principles of our founding in everything we do. To continue to embrace the free enterprise system, which is the only economic system in the world that allows people to emerge from the circumstances of their birth. To continue to embrace the constitutional principles of our republic, would teach people that it is possible to be a great nation and still embrace freedom and democracy. These are the stakes of this election. This is truly what we are deciding when we vote in November, and not just for the White House, but for the Senate and the Congress, and even in local state offices. And in the end, as frustrated as sometimes we may get with the leadership of our own party on one issue or another, the logical home of the limited government constitutional Republican principles of our nation is the Republican Party. The logical home for the defense of the free enterprise system is the Republican Party. It is the only organization in modern American politics that is still capable at this moment of driving forward these concepts and these principles that are so important for our future, and requires us to unite behind it with a sense of purpose and focus unlike any we have had in our lifetimes. This election will truly decide, in so many ways, what kind of nation we will leave our children and our grandchildren. And for Americans, that's a special obligation. Because you see, none of us came here on our own. The nation that we enjoy today, the one that's giving you prosperity and opportunity, is a result of the hard work and the sacrifices and the choices of the men and women who stood before where we stand now. Every generation of American, every single one, the generation of your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, every single generation of American before us has been asked to answer the question that now we must answer. Are you prepared to do what must be done in order to remain great? Are you prepared to face the challenges that we must face and solve in order to remain exceptional? Are we prepared to do what it takes to keep America the single greatest nation in the world? Every generation of American has been asked that question, and every single one before us has answered yes. And now it is our turn. And we should be grateful that we have been given the opportunity to answer that call. Because before us lies the extraordinary promise of this new century, which has every opportunity to be greater than our past. Our future has an opportunity to be better than our history. This century has an opportunity to be an American century as well. There is no problem that we face too big for us. There is no challenge before us that we cannot solve. There is nothing wrong with the American people. We are still the most creative, the most ambitious, and the most innovative people in all the world. We are still a collection of go-getters, the descendants of men and women who came here at some point in their history to build for themselves a better life that they could not do in the nation of their birth. The descendants of men and women who overcame the scourge of slavery and bigotry to stake their claim to the American dream. We are descendants of go-getters, every single one of us. That is our common heritage. That is our common destiny. To, as a nation, build a place here better than the one we've known in the past. As hard as that is to believe, it is possible and it is within our reach. If only we are willing to do what those who came before us did. Face the circumstances and challenges of our time and solve them. And in so doing, ensure that the great story of America did not end with us. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Marco Rubio. I think, Senator, it's pretty safe to say you added about 1,200 or so folks to your fan club tonight.
Oh, thank you.
And on behalf of all South Carolina Republicans, we want to give you a small token of our appreciation so you can remember our great state, and we want you to come back often. A lot of us out here, probably everybody in this crowd, is hoping you have some serious decisions to make in the coming months. But I do feel certain that if those decisions aren't going to have to be made in the next few months, they will in the next few years. And I think you can add about 1,200 people to your prayer warrior list.
Thank you.
And we'll be lifting you up. We thank you for your leadership and all you're doing for America. God bless you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. For me? Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
One more great big hand, Senator Marco Rubio.
C-SPAN